Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Joey Chen. When it comes to improving this country's public education, there are endless hopeful headlines about charter schools, voucher programs, and districts that offer open enrollment to anyone who wants to be there. But for all the promise and the progress of the school choice movement, the simple reality is that hundreds of thousands of students remain trapped in failing school districts because of their zip codes. As America Tonight special correspondent Soledad O'Brien found out, every year thousands of students try to get themselves into better schools by illegally enrolling in districts they don't live in. And school boards are now taking extreme measures to crack down.
You want one now?
Yeah.
It's 7:30 in the morning, and second grader Jack Larkin is getting ready for school.
Honey, we need to do your writing journal.
I did.
You did? Your philosophy journal too?
Yeah, I did.
Jack and his parents live in Millburn, New Jersey, about half an hour from New York City, in a county that has some of the richest neighborhoods and some of the poorest neighborhoods in the state. Luckily for Jack, Millburn is one of the wealthier towns. His school system is one of the state's best.
How about one of these nice green apples?
Well, I have them for the snack.
Have it for snack?
Jack's mom, Stephanie Mallios, has both a personal and professional take on the Millburn Public Schools.
This is 14 South Terrace in Short Hills. 3 bedrooms, possibly 4.
She's one of the top real estate agents in town and knows the schools are the selling point of the neighborhood.
The suburbs are all about the elementary schools. I love you. Bye.
There are 5 elementary schools, a middle school, and Millburn High School, which consistently ranks as one of the top performing schools in the country. A 98% graduation rate, 70% of juniors and seniors taking and passing at least one advanced placement test.
When people buy a home in Millburn, what they're getting for their money is a great commute, a fantastic community, and an excellent school system. It's really the 3 things that most people are looking for when they're shopping for a home for their family.
The schools are technically public, but the price of admission to live in this Tony Township is a whopping $1.3 million. That's the average sale price of a home here. Average real estate taxes run around $20,000 a year. There are some lower-priced rentals, but no officially designated affordable housing in Millburn.
The way it works in New Jersey is that you go to school within your zip code. It's a zip code education system.
Laura Waters is president of the Lawrence Township School Board in Mercer County and author of the blog NJ Left Behind.
Any parent would love to have their kids enrolled in Millburn. They offer 23 AP courses. The kids have enormous opportunities, enormous access to their academic interests in all sorts of ways.
A few miles down the road, it's a different story.
If you live 10 miles away from Millburn, say in Newark, New Jersey, then you might go to Barringer High School as opposed to Millburn High School. Barringer High School in Newark has about a 56% graduation rate. There are almost no AP courses. Most of the kids fail to reach proficiency in language arts and math. And the reason those kids go to Barringer is because that's where their parents can afford to live.
Barringer is considered one of the state's worst performing schools. Violence is routine. In October 2012, a male student was stabbed to death. 2 years earlier, a female student was sexually assaulted in an empty classroom.
They don't have a choice. They're stuck.
They cannot go to another public school.
No. And that seems to me so hellaciously unfair.
Not everyone is stuck. New Jersey does have charter schools and an inter-district transfer program for a small number of students, less than 3% of the total. And the high-performing school districts want to protect their borders. After all, it's mostly their local property taxes that are paying for the schools.
Schools try to be vigilant about creating a registration system that confirms that the children who are enrolled in the school actually live in the district.
Because the people who live in a wealthy district are funding the education.
They are personally funding the schools. It all comes on the backs of those taxpayers. So if you say, well, there's a kid from Newark who's trying to sneak in, we're not going to pay for that kid. He doesn't live here.
Because that way they're always going.
Private investigator Jimmy Messis knows the extremes that schools will go to keep students out. He's built his business on it. Messis launched Verify Residents 5 years ago in response to the growing number of school districts that were reaching out to him to make sure all their students lived where they said they did. It's a kind of suburban border patrol. From his surveillance van equipped with a secret periscope and wall-to-wall monitors, Messis and his partner Jim Nanos have tracked hundreds of students.
So how does it work? I mean, walk me through the process. Does a school reach out to you and say, we have a suspicion about a student?
The school will reach out to me and they'll say, we'd like you to do an audit of our student roster. We'll run the student names through the database, but it might often come back as totally out of district, out of town, out of state. In New Jersey, we've had a lot of cases where the students actually lived in Pennsylvania or New York City and they were coming to school in New Jersey, and we'll immediately be able to identify those kids.
There are no real statistics on just how many students are enrolled illegally in schools that are outside the district where they live. The School Board Association here in New Jersey says they don't track that data, but there are more than 500 school districts here in this state. And because in many cases there are poorly performing schools just blocks away from highly performing schools, Messis says that in fact border hopping happens all the time.
There's one specific district in New Jersey where it's very common for them to have over 100 students per year that are actually out of district. And they confront them, they have residency officers that'll confront the parents and say, look, you don't live in the district, you have to register in the school district that you actually belong to.
How do you feel about it personally? I mean, like in theory, everybody's public school should be roughly equivalent, right?
Basically, as an investigator, I try not to get involved into the personal aspect of why people are doing what they're doing. Bottom line, they're breaking the law.
That was great. That was great. Good job.
For an educator, it's a little more complicated.
That's something I struggled with, you know.
Adam Freed is superintendent of Harrington Park School District in Bergen County.
As a teacher, we know what we need to do, right? But as a superintendent, because of our tax structure in the state of New Jersey, we have stakeholders that we are responsible for.
How much of your budget here comes from the taxes of the people who live in this district?
It's roughly 90%.
90.
90%.
Have you hired a private investigator before?
We have. We've had to. And it breaks your heart to do that, but you know that there is 5,000 community members that you're responsible for. And you have an ultimate responsibility as the superintendent. But as an educator, like I said, that's the piece that drives your heart.
In New Jersey, the consequences include expulsion or paying back the school district's tuition. But in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and 5 other states, plus Washington, D.C., boundary hoppers can be charged criminally for theft of educational services and wind up serving time.
I never thought that I would go to jail for lying about my zip code.
When we return, parents locked up for stealing an education.
And welcome back. Before the break, our America Tonight special correspondent Soledad O'Brien reported on boundary hopping. That's a phenomenon when families who sneak their kids into the good schools right out of their own districts. As she continues this America Tonight in-depth report, Soledad introduces us to parents facing serious penalties for doing it.
So she wants you to elaborate on them?
Kelly Williams Bolar of Akron, Ohio is a 43-year-old mother and a teacher's aide. She was also a convicted felon. She went to jail in 2011 for illegally enrolling her children in the wrong school district.
I had issues with my neighborhood, unsafe neighborhood. I had a prowler around the home. I had someone who broke into my home. You know, I was talking to my father about it. So he said, just, send them to our school, my school. He said, you're here every day, you're here all the time anyway,
Was it done to sort of sneak it in? I mean, did you know I'm putting an address where I don't live?
Right. I've been working for the school system for many years, so I knew about a lot of students that did the same thing.
Just find an address, put it down.
Right. Well, yeah, and it wasn't so much that I found it. It wasn't like it was, Burger King's address. This was my dad's address, and we both lived off the same, road. It was just that he lived in the township and I lived in the city. But we literally lived 5 minutes away from each other.
And the township had better schools.
Well, yeah, they did have good schools. She absolutely loved the school.
Her daughter Jada enrolled in her grandfather's school district, Copley Fairlawn.
We had things that I've never even would think elementary school would have. We had a computer lab, we had the garden outside, we had our own greenhouse. And I was just so grateful to have been able to go there for just 2 years.
So tell me how you were caught.
Well, what I understand is that they had an investigator from Cleveland area, I think, and he would come down and he would watch my whereabouts, like, you know, he would watch me go to and fro. And then they came to their conclusion, stating that they had clear and convincing evidence that I did not live or reside in Copley.
Williams-Bolar withdrew her children from school and enrolled them back in Akron.
It was a huge difference. It was huge. We didn't learn that much. There was a lot of it was disruptive in classes. There was no resources. It was just completely different, and I felt like I wasn't learning anything at all.
Williams-Bolar was surprised, she says, when 18 months later, she was indicted. What was the charges?
Grand theft, which was the money, then signing forgery. Forgery.
She went to jail for 9 days. The judge said she wanted to send a message to others like her.
You know, I had the swabbing of the mouth, I had the fingerprinting, I had the picture.
Who was taking care of your daughters?
My dad. The irony of it all. My father. He had to watch them. He had to keep them.
In his house that was in the district that they allegedly never were in.
Right, right.
Williams-Bolar's story generated national outrage. A petition to free her went viral, and Ohio's governor, John Kasich, pardoned her.
I wouldn't have done it. I never thought that I would go to jail for lying about my zip code. People do it for their jobs. Maybe they did it for safety reasons. Maybe they do it for education. It's so many different reasons why a parent would want to take their child out of that district into another district.
Here we go.
Alicia and Hamlet Garcia of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, were also arrested and charged with theft of services or stealing an education.
We got handcuffed like criminals with a belt, handcuffed
with the leather belt,
with the leather belts,
with the handcuffs to our.
We went in jail. We spent a couple hours in jail.
Hamlet Garcia, a Cuban immigrant, married Alicia, a Ukrainian immigrant, in 1998. In 2011, they were having marital issues, and Alicia moved out of their home in Philadelphia with their daughter, Fiorella. They moved in with Alicia's father, a homeowner in nearby Montgomery County. Fiorella enrolled in kindergarten at Pine Road Elementary. The Garcias say they reconciled, and Alicia and Fiorella moved back to Philadelphia. They decided to let Fiorella finish the school year in Montgomery County, in the grandfather's school district. That's when the trouble began.
The school district contacted us in April and said there's a problem with your residency. So we came in to meet with the principal.
And what happened?
She kept insisting that I never lived there, and she's turning us to the police.
The superintendent wouldn't talk to us, but she made good on her threat and turned the case over to police. The Garcias say they were cooperating, showing mail, Alicia's voter registration, and other proof that she was living in Montgomery County.
We haven't heard anything for maybe a month. And then in August, he called us and said that we have a choice to turn ourselves in, or he putting out a warrant to arrest us.
What was going through your mind while they were fingerprinting you and processing
Disgusting.
you? Disgusting.
Disgusting, yeah. Disgusting to the system, disgusting to everything. Everything came to my head as a disgusting because...
I was just in disbelief that this is actually happening in America over education, a 5-year-old child. And I pleaded with superintendent. I said, look, we're good parents, we're good citizens, I'm a business owner. I never did anything. I always, walked the straight line.
The Garcias turned themselves in. The trial is set for next week. In the criminal complaint, the district attorney alleges the Garcias stole $10,000 from the county, the price of 1 year's tuition at Pine Road Elementary. That's a felony, punishable by up to 7 years in prison. The school district website reads, "It is the intent to prosecute to the fullest extent of the law any individual furnishing false information about their residency." In Pennsylvania, as in all states, school districts get some federal and state funding, but property taxes are the primary source for funding public schools. The gap between rich and poor school districts is so vast that the state earned a D on the National Report Card on School Funding. That report card is put out by the Education Law Center in New Jersey.
There would be an argument from a school that would say, listen, we fund this school with taxpayer money, some state and some federal funds, but the people in the community pay for this school that's in this, this county. So you're not from here, you don't get to attend.
I can answer the argument. First of all, my wife did live in that district. Okay.
My father is a taxpayer who owns the house there.
I believe that every children should have access to quality education, regardless the color of the skin, the background, the ethnic, the socioeconomic status.
And the district attorney would say, you do, and it's in Philadelphia. It is not in Montgomery County.
And I would answer to her that is wrong because we are members from the same state and actually of the same country. So do not treat me like an illegal alien because I live in Philadelphia.
Wouldn't the argument be, right, so you should stay in Philadelphia where you're paying taxes?
If the schools are unsafe, if you live in Philadelphia because you are a person that don't have the money to live in Montgomery County, that's not your fault that you cannot make the same money that those folks, okay?
Is the school that is in your neighborhood in Philadelphia, is that school unsafe?
It is unsafe.
It's underperforming.
They didn't pass the AYP, which is for the No Child Left Behind law.
The Montgomery County Assistant DA canceled a planned interview with us, but the Garcias think they're a test case. According to court documents, the Lower Moreland School District had identified at least 10 families who had illegally enrolled there the same year. They were ousted too, but so far the only family being prosecuted is the Garcias.
Let's go use the Garcia family to make an example, to make sure that everybody knows in Philadelphia, you try to cross that border, this can happen to you.
It's an interesting phrase you use, to cross the border.
But that's the way they treat the Philadelphia citizens in Montgomery County district.
We're talking about Philly, we're not talking about Canada.
Well, yeah, well, there is a line where they don't want people to cross.
Our special correspondent Soledad O'Brien rejoins us now. Soledad, explain this to us. The trial starts next week. Is there really a likelihood that this woman will go to jail?
Well, there is a possibility that the parents, in fact, the Garcias, could go to jail. Remember, if you value their education for their daughter at $10,000, that then means that it's possible that they could face 7 years in prison. Now, listen, I think if you're asking rationally, is that very likely? Most people are saying they would probably get something like probation, but of course, as it goes to court, and that's going to happen on the 28th, you never really know.
What about the other families involved in all this?
Yeah, interesting, right? There were 10 other families that had a similar situation. The Garcias would say, listen, we're being targeted. What happened to the other 10 families? Well, we were told that those 10 families, in fact, had worked out a deal, that they had paid the tuition, if you will, and so it sort of stopped for them. Now, the Garcias would say, well, we have offered to pay back what we owe, and we were rebuffed. There are others who would say that actually never happened. And I think that detail, which they are on opposite sides of, I think they're going to have to work out that detail when it comes to the courts. But, again, if they were able to work it out for these 10 families, what exactly happened in the Garcias case, we'll have to wait till the trial starts to really figure that out.
So I guess that opens up the broader question. How many kids are involved in this kind of thing? Could there be a whole lot more?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. When we know it's in the thousands, and when you talk to superintendents of certain districts, they'll say when they did their canvassing of their rolls that, in fact, in some cases they had to ask 200 students to leave. So in a place like New Jersey, where you're spending roughly 18 grand per kid, that's serious money. In other schools, they'll say there's 1 or 2 kids every so often, and in some places, of course, they don't have any at all. It all depends on what border you're actually talking about. But in some districts, it's a huge number. And ultimately, it goes to the bigger problem, right, which is inequity in education, in public school education, which philosophically, theoretically, should be sort of the same for every student who's in public school, but in practicality and reality, it's really not.
Yeah, really, Soledad. I mean, there's so many places you hear that. Here in the Washington area, we hear that so often. But think about this. I mean, I'm sure districts are trying to control their costs and all this. I'm sure that there's a need for taxpayers to think, well, look, you paid your taxes. You're supposed to just take what the education gives you. What is the solution? I mean, aside from, well, what's really making all the schools fair and how practical is that? What's the solution here?
Yeah, it's a tough thing. There are some programs where the schools can opt in to take some students, but at the end of the day, when taxpayers are footing the bill for, say, 98% of the cost, there is a sense from some of the people in town that, listen, we actually pay for the overwhelming amount of what this tuition is, and so we should be able to limit who's, has access to it. And of course, you have people who have a lower tax base, or even sometimes they're spending a lot of money on those students in a school that's just less good, and so the parents want them out. They want access to other things. I think, and most of the people you talk to say, it's not a small fix, obviously, but it really is a fix that involves how do we feel about reform in education, right? It's really a massive problem. How do you make it equal for every student, no matter what school they're attending? How do you possibly allow students from one district to be able to access another district? It happens in some places, and New Jersey has a very tiny, limited program. So I think it's more of a matter of the bigger question, what do we value in education? What is a public education supposed to do? Is it supposed to be fair across the board? And once you answer that big question, then you can really think about solutions. But in the short term, there's no great solution on the horizon, I think.
America Tonight special correspondent Soledad O'Brien, thanks for following up on this important story. Really something that matters to a lot of people.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Soledad.
Thank you very much. You bet.